Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues brings expert guests to the airwaves to talk through your divorce questions and fill in the gray areas about separating. From thinking about divorce to how to behave during divorce to what to do after, this is Divorce Dialogue. Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. I'm the founder of the Miller Law Group, and I am a trainer at the Center for Understanding in Conflict, and I am on a mission to change how people divorce and help them divorce with dignity. And I'm thrilled to welcome Jennifer Teplin to the show today. Jennifer is a licensed clinical social worker, and she's the founder of Manhattan Wellness, which is a boutique psychotherapy practice that helps young professionals build lives they truly love. She's known for her direct, collaborative, and human-centered approach, and she empowers clients to challenge limiting patterns, embrace authenticity, and create meaningful personal transformation. Welcome, Jennifer Teplin. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for our dialogue.
So I know that you founded Manhattan Wellness, particularly to help young professionals who are looking to live lives they truly love. And I'm going to tell you in a minute why that has such meaning for me. And, not just things that they thought they should do, lives that look good on paper.
Mhm.
So what patterns do you see in clients or people who come to you who are just, checking the boxes, but they still feel unfulfilled?
Yeah, I think that everyone has a vision of what they think life should be. And then there's what I want life to be. But then I think there's this in between, which is the reality of what we're working with. And I find so often, whether it's a young professional, it's someone in their mid 40s, it's someone in their 60s, we have endless opportunities to start over, make a change, or get focused. And I find that when someone gets real and honest and has the permission to say, oh, this either looks great on paper or it's not what I thought or not what I wanted. There's such a freedom in that space. And I realized there was a gap in the market. Every therapist in the city at the time was extremely clinical or extremely cold or was extremely general. And my goal was to figure out, what do people need? What do I think I wish existed? And can I create it? And that's really how Manhattan Wellness came to be.
It's really interesting. We were talking in the minute or two before the show about our names and our maiden names versus our married names. And I told you Miller is the name of my first husband and not my maiden name, and nor is it the name of my current husband. And along those lines, it really, Jennifer, makes me think about what really led to this situation I find myself in today. And part of it was that as a young woman, I was not sure what I wanted. And so I was just going through life pretty much checking the boxes. And along the way, I got pretty sick, actually. I think that the stress of doing what I thought other people wanted me to do, or what was the right thing to do, or the whatever those boxes were, led me to a path where I was in a marriage that wasn't working for me. I was in a job that wasn't working for me. I was living in a place that wasn't working for me. And it all looked really, really good on paper. But boy, I was really unhappy. And so when I hear you talk about those people who might find themselves in a similar situation, it really feels like a real need for a lot of people who grow up in successful families and just don't know how to choose a path. Is that accurate?
Oh, it's completely accurate. And I think whether someone wants to admit it or not, we have all been in that space multiple times in our life of who I want to be, who I should be, who I am. And I think it's finding where those three lives kind of cross that really, in my opinion, finds that perfect sweet spot of what it is. And I think so often when I think about young professionals, it's who my parents told me I should be. And then I think when it's, an older life phase, like we're having children, you either loved your upbringing or didn't. I find that not a lot of people are super neutral on that topic. And so you either, again, want to emulate or want to do the complete opposite. And we're always looking outside of ourselves for the answers. And that's when someone stumbles into our office because they realize I'm allowing everyone else to control my life and I would like to be a little more empowered. And that's really where a therapist steps in and gives you permission to stumble, be curious, maybe be wrong about a few things, and it doesn't have to mean the end of the world. And that to me is so freeing.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, let's move that conversation to divorce because just in my own personal
Mhm.
story, I decided to get divorced, move out of New York City to the suburbs, quit my job. I mean,
You did
was
it all at once.
was a complete redo
Yeah.
because I saw an opportunity and I was afraid, I think, that if I didn't like just completely do this, just rip that band-aid right off, then I would lose the courage to do all the things that needed to be done. And I was just like, nope, I'm going to live my life for me. And basically, a chronic illness I'd been suffering with for 15 years just went away, like overnight. It was
That's
incredible.
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing, actually. And so I don't think everybody has to do that. And you don't necessarily need to be like, yeah, I'm just going to burn this thing all the way down. Sorry,
See
kids.
what's left. Totally.
So, how does the approach that you take help people maybe take littler steps or sooner?
Yeah, so I think, as the world continues to move forward, divorce is also happening at younger ages. So I think that divorce wasn't happening for 20 plus years, 10 years ago. And now people are actually saying, like, oh, this doesn't work. And I find that our perspective gives someone the space to actually admit, oh, I'm not happy. I think that's the first step in divorce. No one who thinks they're happy in a relationship is like, I'm happy. I'm going to now leave this person, right?
Yeah.
Resentment builds, distrust builds, and all of that, the underlying aspect is my needs aren't being met. And I think when you give yourself permission to recognize, like, this isn't working for me, let me figure out why it's not. And divorce might be that right answer. Sometimes it's couples counseling and it's being able to express yourself and your partner agrees and you can work on it. But sometimes that's not the answer. And I've been in sessions with couples and sort of said to them, like, I don't see how you're going to meet eye to eye on this topic. Like, is it something we can move past or is it a hard no for us? And that's a really hard conversation, but it's the truth. And I think so often, you can speed up your process if you're truthful with who you are and what you need. And I think when it comes to divorce, especially, it's helping someone picture what's life after the divorce. Because I often see when someone wants to get divorced, they're so stuck in the, okay, I've now admitted I want to get divorced. This is going to be so messy. I'm so scared. Oh, but the truth is, no one's really thinking about what's on the other side of that. Like, let's say your divorce happens, it's messy. Most of the time it is, unfortunately. Or maybe you have like the greatest divorce ever. I love that. What happens next? And I think when you can help someone build out the life post divorce, it helps them get the courage and the motivation to just move through these steps with a bit more courage.
Yeah, I always say that divorce stands at the intersection between what was and what will be.
I
And
love that.
if you can think as you maneuver the intersection toward what you want it to be, and if you do
Mhm.
that forward, looking at what your own true values are, what you want to
Mhm.
do. Like I built this firm out of my experience and what I wanted to do for people going forward, and it's been
Yeah.
I think really great for me, and I hope really great for our clients as well. I mean, even though
Mhm.
it is difficult time rather than miring yourself in the worry and the anxiety and all of that. And I think that's what you're saying. So how can people really get real with themselves and be emotionally honest? Because sometimes those are really scary conversations.
Yeah. So I love to have clients reflect. I was last happy in my relationship when, and
That's great.
fill in that blank. And it might be before we took this big financial risk, before I had children, before he started drinking a lot, before she changed everything she was passionate about, right? And if we can get back to like that last success space, I think there's a lot of growth that can happen, and you can then analyze, like, okay, so where did we veer off from there? And what do we want to do about it? And I think that's the problem. So often people realize it's not working, but they're so stuck in the fear of what do I do now? And when you can have the space, and whether it's someone like you to coach someone through like the true steps of divorce, or it's someone like me to help them see what their options are and play out what they think it's going to look like, feel like, and function. I just think so often it's helpful to get out of your own head, or you're maybe contemplating divorce and you have that one friend who's been through a divorce. And it's hard. I feel that therapy used to be very hush hush, and now people are much more open about it. Divorce, in my opinion, still has that negative hush hush stigma. And you sort of look to whoever that one person who's already done it And while it's really helpful to go to that person, to take one person's perspective and let that be your entire understanding of an experience is so naive. And I find that's what gets people so tripped up and stops people who maybe should have gotten divorced from actually going through with it.
Yeah, I think possibly those people need someone like you and someone like me.
Fair, very
Right?
fair.
Because it's a process, right? And it's a process of redefining yourself. Whether or not you're the person choosing it or not,
Mhm.
that divorce hits us in every aspect of our lives, where we live, who we live with, what if we have children, what our parenting arrangements look like, and
Yeah.
we take a much harder look at the amount of time we're spending with our kids and what the quality of that time is. It hits us in the pocketbook, it hits us in our budget. So,
Mhm.
and it certainly hits us in terms of our feelings of happiness
Yeah,
or sadness. And so
absolutely.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I want to remind people that I'm Catherine Miller and that you're listening to Divorce Dialogues. This is a podcast dedicating to educating people about divorce related topics so that everyone can divorce with dignity. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts to be sure that you don't miss an episode. And I'm talking with Jennifer Teplin today. She's the founder of Manhattan Wellness, and we're talking about, well, the emotional progress of divorce and what can help people navigate that as successfully as possible. And Jennifer, for people, a lot of times people find themselves sort of out of the frying pan into the fire when it comes to
Mhm.
relationships, right? And they find themselves having the same relationship over and over and over again. And so for someone who's in a divorce process, thinking about divorce process, or newly divorced, what are the first steps that they could think about taking to avoid
Repeating
repeating the
history.
same thing? Yeah.
I think is looking at our own side of the street. So often we look at what everyone else is doing wrong or what everyone else is doing to us. And it's this chronic uniqueness where I am the victim, everything strange is happening to me. And so often people take away their power and take away their choice. It's really hard to look in the mirror and own your stuff. But once you're aware of your stuff, you can actually do something about it. But when we're naive and we're blaming everyone else and we're holding the mirror up to them and saying, it's not me, you hold on to the hot potato, you're never going to have growth. And that is why you see someone dating the same woman 3 times in a row, chronically getting divorced and thinking everyone's crazy. Like if the same thing is happening over and over again, you have to recognize that you're a player in this game. And I think if you want to make change, it's taking ownership and being curious and being a little humble about figuring out what your roles are.
Yeah. I've worked with a business coach once who said that people fall into one of three categories when something goes wrong. They either blame the other person, blame
Mhm.
the circumstances, or blame themselves. And if you blame the other person or you blame the circumstances, there's not much you can do about it. But at least if you blame yourself, you have the opportunity to make a change.
That's funny, but true.
Yeah. So, I think that when a lot of my clients say to me, I am never going to date again. Right. I
You
say,
are.
well, yes, exactly. I say, listen, next, if you're thinking about remarrying, please give me a call for oh, no, 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 that's never going to happen. I'm not
Mhm.
even dating. And then inevitably, 2 years later, they call me and they say, hey, guess what, Catherine? And then they
Mhm.
laugh. I'm like, you're getting remarried. And they're like, yeah, I never thought that was going to
And there's
happen.
nothing wrong with that. Like,
No, of
we are
course not.
human, we are meant to partner, but can you partner in a smarter way this time?
Yeah. So, what are the challenges that people face, do you think, your clients, young professionals, when it comes to repartnering, dating again, and thinking about having another long-term relationship, whether or not it's married or not?
I think the first real important factor is, were you the one to choose the divorce, or were you the person that was told we're getting a divorce? There's something extremely empowering in making the choice and making the decision. And when I'm going to say happens to you, although I think we're always active participants, but we're not the one that makes the final decision. I think it can be extremely disempowering. So for the individual who was told, I want a divorce, I think there's a lot of work for them to do in finding trust again, feeling ownership in a relationship, and increasing communication so that they can feel safe. I often find that if you were on the receiving end of the divorce, you most likely have an anxious attachment style. So you're feeling insecure. You need a lot of reassurance from a partner when you start dating again. And for the individual who chose and sort of made that final decision, and I know I'm using the wrong language, so feel free to correct me. But
You're
I
doing fine.
find that person, you know, feels like they can just keep moving in a way. And I think they really need to do the inner work of what didn't work and what can I do differently here. And I think for anyone who has gotten divorced and they're getting back in the space, ask yourself, what's the worst case scenario that can happen? And I love having clients say, best case, worst case, most likely, write it down in your phone. And then you have a space to compare to as you start dating and getting into a relationship again. Humans assume the worst case scenario so often. It rarely happens. So if you give yourself a minute to reflect, put it in your phone, and then you have this bounce board to kind of go off of, I think it acts like a really great guardrail for that next relationship.
Yeah, I think that people don't necessarily know what to expect from marriage or what to expect
Mhm.
from a long-term relationship. I was just talking to a woman this morning and she said, it's been bad from the beginning. I just didn't realize it. Like that I didn't
Sure.
realize it wasn't supposed to be this way. And I think when people are thinking about repartnering or even thinking about whether or not to end a marriage, they often wonder, well, what's normal? And how would you help them, Jennifer, answer that question?
Normal is the bane of my existence. I have no answer for you. I think normal is what's acceptable to you and what are your standards. And some people accept things that they probably shouldn't, and they have to decide if they want to make a change or not. But I think also some people look at normal and their barometer is the friends around them, which again, isn't necessarily the perfect measurement. I think we have to come up with what our own standards are. And I think often when we're leaving a relationship, that's a great time to reflect on what worked in this relationship, what didn't work in this relationship, what will I no longer put up with? And that's the new floor. And the ceiling is endless from my perspective, especially when we're starting anew. But normal is, I would say, happy more times than not. Not expecting to be happy 24/7. That's not life. That's not reality. But also realizing that things, especially at the beginning, should be easy, especially when you're a young professional and you're starting to date. You don't have a mortgage, you don't have kids, there's no health scares. Like life is really simple. So if you're in a high conflict relationship or you guys just cannot be on the same page, to me, that's totally a non-starter. Like nothing's happened yet and you're already in a bad spot. That cannot be someone's normal, or in my opinion, should not be someone's normal. And I think as difficult things happen, relationships either crumble or you come together. And if you can learn that skill to constantly keep coming together and supporting each other, those to me are the most successful relationships. And I will say, to me, the guarantee of a relationship not working is contempt. It's someone that genuinely does not like their partner, finds the wrong in their partner all the time. Like, if you truly can't stand to be around your partner, why are you doing it? And I think that's something that I've asked many clients. If this brings you no joy, what's keeping you there? And that's a really scary question for people to answer.
Yeah, well, I could answer that question. I think a lot of times it's the fear of the unknown, right? I think
Mhm.
that people people choose to divorce when it feels worse at home than it feels like it would be in the real world. And
Mhm.
they choose not to divorce when what feels like outside of the marriage feels scarier than staying with the familiar. And that's a combination of what's actually happening and who
Yeah.
you are, I think, right?
I think it's also extremely scary to be alone at
Yeah.
any age. That's really scary. And often I see people would rather stay with a partner who's not really right for them, but it's not horrible, than risk being alone forever.
Yeah. I mean, lots of times our clients say to us, well, I knew it wasn't good, but I didn't think it was that bad, right?
Mm.
When the other person chooses to end the marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're listening to the Divorce Dialogues podcast, and I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues has been educating people about divorce and relationship issues for over 10 years. Subscribe to the podcast, and don't forget to check out our previous episodes on the podcast website, divorcedialogues.com. And I'm talking today with Jennifer Teplin, the founder of Manhattan Wellness. And Jennifer, if people want to learn more about you or get in touch, how can they do that?
Our website is manhattanwellness.org. or you can shoot us an email, which is hello@manhattanwellness.org. We make it extremely simple. We will get you in as soon as possible, or just answer any questions that you have.
That's great. Therapy is often people go to therapy to fix something. And obviously, when you feel like you have an unhappy relationship and are considering divorce or marriage, going to therapy is probably a good idea to help. But how can you maybe reframe that something is broken question that needs to be fixed for people who are maybe hesitant to start or still thinking of therapy as something that only happens if you're sick?
Mm-hmm. So I like to think of therapy as life optimization. The right time to come to therapy is when actually nothing is wrong. Most people come into therapy when there's a fire, and we can help you put out the fire, but we don't really know much about you. Now we're in crisis. I'm trying to help you figure it out. And it's so much better to have someone in your back pocket who knows you, who knows the players, who knows the circumstances. So when life happens, and it always does, you have someone there to assist you. So to me, anyone who thinks life could flow better is a great candidate for therapy. Anyone who wants to understand themselves more is a great candidate for therapy. Anyone who wants just a space dedicated to just them, where you are the only person being discussed, everyone has your best interest, and nothing can ever be held against you or said to anyone else, therapy is for you. And I would argue most people fall into one of those categories.
I think so. So, can you give us kind of an example as to how you foster that real-time connection and healing during the sessions, or maybe share an example of when the approach helped a client like break through something that was going on for them?
Oh, absolutely. So what comes to mind, just because it's a really easy mindset shift, is someone that has disordered eating. And so often clients will come in and say, oh, well, my entire life I saw my mom eat this way and her body was beautiful. So I followed that direction. My body's also beautiful, but all I do is think about food. If I don't exercise, I won't allow myself to have something. And they start to notice this really challenging behavior. And it's having a therapist be able to say to you, oh, it's restriction. Oh, and put these labels and terms on something that you can realize, oh, it's not just me, is extremely freeing. And the practice I have in Manhattan Wellness, we have 25 therapists that all work in a similar style to myself, which is real and authentic. The way I've spoken to you today is how your therapist is going to speak with you. It's not sterile, it's not clinical, it's an honest, real conversation. And our goal is for it to feel sort of like an older sister, but a licensed therapist. And I found that what got in the way for so many people who wanted to explore therapy was feeling like someone was judging, criticizing, or observing you. No one wants to walk into your room, sit there, and have someone across from them be silent or say, how do you feel? Like, guess what? If I felt great, I wouldn't be here with you. Like, it's really rare for someone to say, my life is perfect. You know what? I want to do? Poke holes in it. Like, that's just not going to happen. And most people's lives aren't perfect. I have a great life. I wouldn't change anything, but it's by no means perfect. I don't know that anyone's really is. So by having these honest, real, safe conversations, I think it has made therapy more approachable, more digestive, and more attractive in a world where so little is real anymore.
Yeah. And I know that for people who are young professionals early in their career, ambitious,
Mhm.
driven, that there's a balancing of that stress from from careers, but it's also a time we're supposed to be partnering and marrying and building our families. So how do your clients balance, or how do you help them balance that sort of personal happiness and professional success, which of course personal happiness might also depend on?
Oh, it's so hard. And, you know, I might be biased, but I think especially as a woman and a working woman who's growing a family, I understand why my mother and many mothers that I knew growing up were stay-at-home moms. It is so hard to have a family, have a partner, maintain a household, have a career. Like, you can't do it all, and you can't do it all without help. And I find that so many people are unwilling to ask for help. And they think help means I'm weak, help means I can't do it. And the truth is, everyone can do stuff, but sometimes you need to ask. And I find that by helping clients recognize, like, you can't do it all because no one can do it all. What can we do and what do we need in order to be able to do more? Enable someone to open their mindset and feel less alone. And I think so many clients that come in to our sessions, and I imagine so many people going through divorce, feel alone and feel like they're the only one experiencing this. And when you can realize you are one of a million in a good way, there's a burden that's released. And I think there's a freedom to actually start making choices that are aligned for you.
Yeah, there's so many opportunities to feel like a failure, right? Your
Mhm.
marriage failed. You're a failure as a parent. You're a failure as the top in your firm because you
Yeah.
are trying to spend some time with your kids. That and no one is just like, wow, you're managing this so well. And if you are
Yep.
managing it so well, you're definitely sacrificing your personal health or well-being.
Mhm.
So if somebody is listening today who is feeling lost after a breakup or is considering a breakup or wondering what they should do and how to figure out what to do, what would you want them to hear the most?
It's okay to feel stuck. It's okay to not feel happy. And to realize that identifying what's not working for you helps you and guides you towards what you actually want. Just because we feel low, just because something didn't work, doesn't mean it's not going to in the future, but allowing that to be a redirection and to lean into it and start to reflect on where you want to go from here is the most powerful thing you can do in that moment.
Jennifer Teplin, thank you so much for being my guest on Divorce Dialogues. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.